interpreted as, you know, a peaceful gesture and so on. But there's a difference between a peaceful gesture and showing weakness. You know, I like to go hiking, and also in Israel and also in the whole world. And one of my favorite areas is Eastern California, the Sierra Nevada of Eastern California. And about 10 or 15 years ago, maybe it's closer to 20, no, about 15 years ago, I was with a grandson in the Sierra Nevada. And my grandson said, hiking, my grandson said, "Oh, Grandpa, I wish we could see a bear." And about 10 minutes later, we saw a bear. And the bear, the light brown, yellowish color, was sitting right on the path, about 20 meters in front of us. We stopped. We stopped, but I said to my grandson, "David, don't turn around. Don't show your back. If you show your back, you are indicating to the bear that you are prey. Okay? And then he will attack. If you don't show your back, don't go ahead, yes? Don't attack him, but don't show your back." This is biological. It is nature. Nature says, show weakness, you are inviting attack. And one does not have to be aggressor. One should not be an aggressor. But the worst thing that you can do is to show weakness.
But you didn't mean the Russian beer.
No. And in fact, what happened was we stood and looked at the bear, and the bear sat and looked at us, and we did not go forward, but we did not go back. And about 3 or 4 minutes later, the bear had enough and walked away. And that was it. So I think that's the way to achieve peace, yes.
Professor
Not fight, not attack, but not show weakness. Yes, sir.
Professor Aumann, how would you say that the emerging global actors, which are strong actors, the emerging global actors, which are strong actors, will have an influence on small actors, which are at sometimes vulnerable and at sometimes weak?
You know, it's okay to show weakness if you are weak. That's okay, yes. If you are weak indeed, but about the worst thing you can do is to show weakness when you're strong, okay? That leads to trouble, yes? That leads to trouble. Showing weakness when you're strong is bad. Let me give an example from home, okay? All right? In 2005, 9 years ago, Israel expelled the Jews from the Gaza Strip. It expelled the Jews from the Gaza Strip as a reaction to terror attacks that had been going on previously, okay? That showed weakness. That's a sign of weakness. You're turning your back on the bear. Right? What happened? What happened was that the Hamas, first of all, took over the Gaza Strip. Yes. I think they won the elections against Abu Mazen, against the, so to speak, more moderate Arabs, yes, but, you know, not much more moderate, but somewhat more moderate. Hamas took over, a terror group took over the Gaza Strip and started sending rockets into Israel. Okay. Now these rockets, Israel did not respond. So again, it was showing weakness until it became too much. Yes, and then Israel attacked in force. So we're not weak. Yes, we're strong, but we showed weakness when actually we're strong. That leads to trouble. That the Caslet campaign, the Pillar of Cloud campaign, the Second Lebanon War in the summer of summer of 2006. All those things, they are reactions. Yes, when you show weakness, and then the other side pushes you, and then you counterattack, and that brings about war. That's what I was saying before you came into the room. That's what brought about World War II. Yeah. World War II was brought about because the Western Allies, France and England, showed weakness in Munich. Yes. And then when Hitler pushed them to the limit, they went to war. And Hitler was eventually defeated. But it was at a terrible price. Yes, it was at a price of millions of people killed. It was a catastrophe of major proportions, the Second World War.
What do you think about states that use decoy as a strategy?
What kind of strategy?
Strategy for acquiring new territories, acquiring new markets, and acquiring influence.
Markets and influence? That's not I don't call that an aggressive act. That's very different from acquiring new territories. Yeah, acquiring new territories is one thing. Acquiring new markets is something else. Acquiring new markets, it depends how you do it. But it seems to me that acquiring a new market is not an act of aggression that should be met by force.
True, and though we see an integrated approach to this as a strategy used by, I don't know, one of the actors around the world.
Which one of the actors?
Well, let's say what happened in Ukraine at this moment can...
yeah, we were talking about the Ukraine before. My opinion is that one can see what happened in the Ukraine in various ways. Yes, in other words, there was a sort of a coup in the Ukraine. Yes, and in the meantime, I don't. This has not caused a conflagration. I think that the West is mistaken in meddling in the Ukraine. You know, I'm a Westerner myself. I have no love for the Soviets, certainly, as I have no particular love for the Russians, yes, altogether. I just came from Moscow. It's a beautiful city. But it seems to me that if you want to keep the world peace, then one should play it somewhat softly. I think the Ukraine thing can almost better be seen as an act of the kind of act that you were talking about, sort of a pushing forward on the part of the West rather than on the part of the Russians.
Do you think that the United States of America is right in helping the European Union with its problems, or shouldn't leave the European Union to find its own solutions to its problems?
What, the economic problems?
Political and economic problems.
Well, what political problems?
Well, you know that the diplomatic negotiations with the conflict and the incident in Ukraine were headed by the United States of America, by John Kerry.
I don't think that the United States should directly or indirectly involved itself, got involved in the Ukraine. I think that this can be seen as an act of, can rightly be seen as an unfriendly act on the part of the Russians. Okay, yeah.
But the European Union doesn't have the power to play on the European continent with Russia, because Russia is playing chess on the European continent. Russia gave two of the most important chess players in the world. It knows how to play chess.
That's true. Okay.
Europe is playing backgammon at this point.
I've said this, and I don't know how I can make it clearer. I've said this before in this interview, that I think the whole the Ukrainian coup, yes, was an unfriendly act on the part of the West, or the pro-West forces in the Ukraine, against the Russians. I think it seems to me that to some extent this was initiated, can be seen as having been initiated by the West. And if it was not initiated by the West, yes, then the West should not have interfered, should not have gone into this. I don't think so, yes. And it's a delicate situation, but as I said before you came into the room, if the Russians would make a coup in Mexico, let's say, yes, this would not be considered in a very favorable light by the United States. And then if the United States takes some kind of action, yes, then I think a lot of people would justify the United States.
Very interesting. Very interesting.
We want to talk about another principles of your game theory. We understand that we should not attack, but we should not show weakness too. But are there another principles of your theory?
Are there not?
Another principles of your theory, like game theory. For example, when you make a decision, for what?
When you make
a decision.
A decision, yes.
Yes, according to game theory.
Yes.
What leads you?
What makes you?
How you make decision according to their theory of games?
What drives you to make a decision?
I think the basic principle of game theory is to try to give incentives to the other players in the game to do what you would like to do. Okay? So a game is a situation like those that we've been discussing, in which a number of parties are involved and they are striving to different goals. Usually the goals are not opposed. So it's not that one is striving to this goal, one is striving to that. But they're different. One is striving here, one is striving. Okay? So like in an economic transaction, I want to make more money for myself, you want to make more money for yourself, right? Can we do so? If you're selling a piece of property, then the seller wants a higher price, the buyer wants a lower price, okay? So in that sense, the goals are opposed. But they're not opposed in the sense that usually both sides want the transaction to take place, yeah? It's not a zero-sum game, okay? And so that being the case, you want, in playing a game, any game, unless it's zero-sum, most real-life games, by far the most, are not zero-sum. Chess is a zero-sum game, okay? But chess is not economics, chess is not international relations, and so on. Those are not zero-sum games. And when you have a game that's not zero-sum, then each side wants to give the other side incentives to do what player 1 wants to give player 2 incentives to do what's good for player 1. And what does that mean? Since he's giving him incentives, it's going to be good for player 2 also. All right. So that is the name of the game in game theory. The name of the game, as it is in economic theory also, and in economics, not theory, economic practice. You want to give incentives to the other players to do what you want them to do, what's good for you. Okay, that is the name of the game in game theory. And I think everybody agrees that. I think it's probably better for the bear and better for Bob Aumann and his grandson if there's no confrontation. But if he gives, so by turning his back, he's giving an incentive to the bear to attack. Okay, and by going forward, he's also giving an incentive to the bear to attack. But by standing his ground and not going forward, not going back, he's giving an incentive to the bear to go back, and the bear goes away. Okay. All right. So that's game theory.
You made a reference to the equilibrium game in economics. You know that the Nash equilibrium almost worked, or actually works. And his theory was that in a group, if you find that you need to interact with one of the, let's say, actors, 4 or 5 actors, with one of the actors, you go to the one that the other actor does not like or is not completely in favor of. And by going to his, not opponent, but to the other side, then you will make the one that you're interested in looking at you, and thus completing the game. Would that complete game theory?
Well, I heard about something. I never saw the film Beautiful Mind. I never saw it. I didn't read the book, and I didn't see. I know John very, very well, and in previous years he has been over here in Astana. I haven't seen him this year, but I just came this morning. Do you know if he's here?
I didn't see him.
I don't think he's on the program. I didn't see his name on it. But in all the previous fora, he has been here, and I meet him in Astana, I meet him in Lindau, I meet him in other conferences, in game theory conferences, Stony Brook, and so I know him very well. But I have to admit that I never either read the book, A Beautiful Mind, because I didn't feel that I need to read the book. I know the guy so well, and I didn't need to see the movie because I know the guy. And in fact, I don't think he's very happy about the movie. He doesn't talk a lot about it, but I think the movie, I think he feels that the movie is somewhat misrepresentative of him. And I think, if I hear you correctly, you're quoting a scene from the movie, and it's something which I haven't seen. I don't know, but I have heard that this whole scene is not sound. Yes, it does not represent the real Nash equilibrium. Okay, so I understand what a Nash equilibrium is. I don't understand exactly this scene, but I don't think there's much point in going into details. The Nash equilibrium is a very fundamentally important concept in game theory. Absolutely. It has all kinds of applications. Okay?
Yeah, no, I think at least I have another point, sorry.
You have another question?
No.
You have another interview?
Yeah, I have another interview, but thank you very much for you.
Okay,
thank you very much. Yeah.
Well, Professor Aumann, I can stay for 2 more questions if you have.
Please go ahead.